Good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Logtech Live. Obviously, I am not Eric Johnson. Eric is on a well-deserved holiday, so he has once again given me the keys to the Logtech kingdom. My name is Angela Czajkowski. I am Managing Director of Manufacturing, Distribution, Retail, and Logistics at Hartman Executive Advisors. My team and I help executives demystify IT and turn it into a competitive weapon. I'm also the vice president of the board at the Blended Pledge. I know Eric talks about the Blended Pledge every week, and we are so grateful. The Blended Pledge was founded by Let's Talk Supply Chain's own Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. Our mission is to help diverse voices say yes to speaking engagements by providing grants to subsidize travel costs and other costs associated with conference attendance. So please, if you can, consider supporting the Blended Pledge, whether it's through a small donation, through corporate sponsorship, or simply by spreading the word that we are out there on a mission, and we would really appreciate your support. Next on the agenda, and I know this is something that Eric has been talking to you all about regularly, is the Inland Distribution Conference. Inland 2024 is coming soon, September 30th to October 2nd in Chicago. I believe today is the last day for early bird signups, and this is the event for anyone participating in the domestic transportation world, whether your supply chain is domestic only, or if you have any component in domestic. I know there's some air cargo on the discussion as well. The agenda is posted. I've been scoping it out. It looks amazing. Guest speakers, great speakers, and sessions are already lined up. I saw the director of ops from the NMFTA, VP of supply chain strategy and systems at Ulta Beauty, Adam Miller, CEO at Knight Swift, EVP and head of trucking at Flexport. So seriously, take some time, check out this agenda, register if you haven't. This is going to be the place to be for domestic transportation. And again, early bird pricing ends today, so be sure to check it out. Next up is our news of the week. So this week, I am emphasizing two specific articles that the JOC published, and I selected these because they are both heavily focused on venture capital in this space and technology platforms that are enabling effective supply chains, which is something that excites me greatly. It's really where I spend the majority of my time, is how do we use technology, again, as a competitive weapon? And there are some systems that are out there getting VC funding that are trying to essentially continue to enable automation through our supply chain. So the first that we are going to be talking about is a vendor that is enabling shippers to use data. So for me, I speak about this a lot. Data-enabled decision-making. CargoSense is a Virginia-based tech provider. They've secured an $8 million investment from both VC and strategic partnerships. And their primary services are to automate frequently clerical functions within supply chains, which I feel like is something we've been talking about for a really long time. I think it's particularly interesting technology. It sets out to help shippers automate decisions while integrating data sources. So this is, I think this is definitely one to watch as we continue to see where they take the product. A lot of high value goods coming through this. So definitely check it out. And again, VC in this space, a lot of news coming from JOC on that. So don't miss it. The next is a rate management platform. Now, this ShipAngel comes to us from Container's own Graham Parker. ShipAngel announced a $5 million VC funding round in conjunction with a new product launch. Love to hear about new products. This includes contract amendment management and invoice auditing. So the tool has focused on portions of the market that have been bogged down by manual spreadsheets. And we know that spreadsheets are highly labor intensive. They're rife with error, super open to, I guess, clerical mistakes. So between the spreadsheets and other labor-intensive methods that we're using to manage our rates, especially for invoice audit functions, I think this is a really great tool. And again, at the helm, we have Graham Parker from Container. So I think this is another one to watch. I'm excited to see what ShipAngel continues to do with their product and tool. All right. So like Eric, I'm coming off of Home Delivery World. So I was also there in Philadelphia at the HDW Expo, and we heard from some phenomenal industry experts. I came home particularly excited about AI and robotics and distribution, especially in physical warehouses. which brings me to this week's guest, Kristi Montgomery. Kristi is the VP of Innovation, Research, and Development at Kenco Group, which is a super cool title. Now, I first met Kristi at the IWLA Technology Innovation Conference last year, and I immediately became a fan of the work that she is doing. So when I had the opportunity to bring a guest on the show this week, I immediately thought of Kristi. Kristi, welcome to Logtech Live.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you agreed to join us. So, like I said, a lot of, I don't know that this is new. We've been hearing about robotics in this space for a really long time, and I think that's what you first spoke about when I learned of your position, your role. So, if you could just start out, tell our audience a bit more about what it is that you are charged with accomplishing. What are your goals and objectives? What is your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Angela. My background is technology, so I've been in the supply chain industry for about 30 plus years, and so I sat more on the what I'll call the MSs, the management systems, warehouse management, yard management, labor management, all of those systems for 25 plus years. And we just watched as the industry started to evolve into more of how do we automate some of these functions versus having, a human have to be involved in the process. And so Kenco decided at that point to segregate a group of people who could focus solely on true supply chain transformation. In the physical automation space, in the data space, as well as in processes and improving processes. So I am tasked with looking out across our 200 plus customers that fall into 5 major industry areas, and determining how do we help them level up, step level change their supply chains as we look out to the future trends and what's happening in the space, from labor to space and all of those type of constraints that we're facing. So how do I help them find the right tool, the right solution, bring it in, and in a way that is acceptable to the people on the floor, because robotics is right now is still involved with working with the humans, not replacing humans in most cases. So I think my role is really to determine what the best solution is for our customer, and then bring that to bear for them.
I love it. So you just said something, you alluded to something there at the end. Tell us that robots aren't coming to take our jobs. How do you answer that question when people are so concerned that we'll be replaced by robots? What does the real outlook look like for them?
I mean, that is always the question that I get, and I will not claim to be Pollyanna-ish and say there will be no jobs that are impacted by robotics introduction into the warehouse. However, our industry is fraught with a lot of usage of temporary labor because lack of being able to forecast accurately and predict well. And so we're constantly having to bring in additional resources from outside to help our customers through a peak or through just a profile change. So our goal is to get to being able to keep our tenured workers and not have to rely so much on extra labor, but also, I mean, what we see is a lot of jobs are being reskilled and retooled so that people who maybe they drove a lift truck yesterday, but today they're helping the robot find their path in the right way through the warehouse based on their years of knowledge and capability around warehousing. And so let's put that same knowledge to better use in a way that can augment the robotics and automation that we're putting into the facility. So we're looking to upskill our workforce and help them do the more valuable thinking jobs, I'll say it that way, that require more human interaction. Allow them to move and do that, and let the robots handle the travel and the things that are less enjoyable inside the four walls.
Thank you. So before I want to just maybe level set with everyone. So when we talk about robotics and robots and RPA, could you give the listeners just a snippet of what is it?
Sure. So robots, we always think about the physical machine that is either, picking something up or ferrying product from point A to point B, or moving bins or moving boxes, that kind of thing. But in the supply chain world, one of the things we've found significant success with is robotic process automation. Same thing. They're bots, but they're snippets of code that run in the background, and really automate a lot of the manual processes that we still see inside the supply chain today. Think of your typical shipping and receiving office and how you mentioned it earlier, how many spreadsheets they deal with on a daily basis just to manage their day-to-day job. From what are all the trailers that are out on the yard to what are the trailers that are in the dock doors, and where are we on this load being loaded out by 5 o'clock this evening, and just all of that management of the different pieces of information. Oftentimes it's held inside a customer system, inside of our warehouse management system, maybe inside a yard management system, and sometimes the conversations between those systems are not as seamless as we would like. And so there's just a lot of manual data manipulation, which is, obviously fraught with errors and opportunity to be inaccurate. So robotic process automation allows us to really mimic what the human is having to do with all those spreadsheets in a very intelligent way, with bots that sit on a computer behind the scenes and just run that automatically or in a scheduled fashion. And so Kenco's recognized great success with robotic process automation. So I think people need to think in terms of both a digital robot and a physical robot, if that makes sense.
I love that. Thank you for that. And I think that's really helpful. I hope that people don't dismiss robotics and RPA by thinking it's too futuristic, it's too out there, I'm too small, we're not there yet, it's too sophisticated. I look forward to us through this conversation helping folks bridge the gap of, based on where I am today, how can I leverage the technology, robotics technology, and then realize it's not a 10-year in the future journey for me. It can be very real in my present environment with my present tools, maybe not with all of my present tools, but within it's achievable, it's attainable. So I look forward to this conversation, ensuring that the listeners can see a path to this. That doesn't mean they're automating their entire warehouse or automating their entire operation, but it's really, there's incremental ways to do what you just highlighted.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is, you hit on something. That is the way to do it. I mean, we at Kenco have entered into this in a very iterative fashion, and I think that's where you find success. So whether it's the physical robots, let's put in a section of the warehouse and let's pilot and try and say, yeah, that works, and this is the piece that needs to be tweaked, and then we tweak it, and we continue to optimize over time and add different capabilities into the warehouse from a physical perspective, but also on the robotic process automation. We started out with just customers would send emails to us and say, we need information about this particular bill of lading. Can you send us a copy? Well, somebody's in the background researching, finding that copy and emailing it back to the customer. With robotic process automation, that all happens automatically now. It picks up the email, finds that bill of lading number they're looking for, pops that back in an email back to them, and no human had to touch that and spend their time just researching that information. So very simple use cases to start with, but over time we've grown that capability and brought in more complex use cases. But even the very simple things, robotic process automation can really help with. Parsing through 1 million invoices looking for a specific piece of information, right? How long does it take a human? Hours and hours to do some of that information. Looking through orders to determine, did we capture all the information on every single order? And if not, let's pop an alert out to a supervisor and say, hey, in your whole list of 1,000 orders you processed today, this one didn't have all the information and it hasn't gone out the door yet. So let's fix it before it goes, right? Very simple, just data analysis, alerting, emailing, all of those manual manipulation things that you do all day long and you don't think about it. RPA can help with that. And we started with 1 or 2, and then we just kind of rolled it from there to where we're, kind of blowing RPA out in all of our facilities now to tackle those very manual processes.
I love it. And I've always been a big advocate for, let's let our really talented workforce focus on value additive functions that we couldn't solve through some sort of RPA, some sort of automation. And rather, we've got great people in this business. Let them serve clients, let them create value for customers, let them solve the more complex problems. And so I love that this is a solution to freeing people from work that is necessary but less value additive and really focusing on. And I think that's just another way of saying, robots aren't coming to take our jobs. They're taking away the clerical so that we can be more effective and create greater value through our jobs. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people don't often think about is, and we challenge our employees all the time with, how can we do this process better? We're very much a continuous improvement focused organization. And so I would rather those people that are doing, hours of research around the data to give the customer an answer that they want, be able to spend that same amount of time thinking about how do we improve this overall process in this shipping and receiving office, so that now we are more effective for our customer. We're moving product through the warehouse faster. We're getting things out the door in a more accurate and fast manner. We want the humans thinking about optimization, not thinking about, oh, I need to move this piece of data from this piece and part of the spreadsheet to this part in the spreadsheet, right? And then I think as you look at, how that evolves over time, then we want to start moving into what we'll call intelligent RPA, where we start applying artificial intelligence and things like that, so that the RPA now has the ability to do the routine things, but can make some decisions that a human would make against something that comes up as an exception. Because a lot of our lives in supply chain is managing the exceptions versus managing the routine, right? So that's kind of the next evolution of what we see as RPA.
So we talked a bit about RPA in terms of robotics in the warehouse. I heard you reference, was it sort of segmenting off a portion of the warehouse to do some test cases? But my guess is that robotics, even to do that, there is a heavy capital investment to start. And I'm hoping you'll tell me I'm wrong, and that there are. Talk to me about how folks are getting started in robotics, or what are you working on in that space? Can you give us some case studies, some examples of robotics in the warehouse, in distribution, that you're finding to be particularly effective and maybe easier points of entry?
Yeah, and I think the answer is it depends. So there are some of the robotics companies that are very open to demoing their solution in your environment to show how it could work. And maybe that's an afternoon, and they're not going to have you spend a lot of capital on it, but they're going to bring their solution in and show you how it would work in your environment. There are robotics companies that are very open to running a small pilot, starting with a small group of robots in a small area of the warehouse, with a contingency that if they prove themselves from a success metrics perspective that everybody agrees on, then you're going to move forward with the larger implementation. So there's that potentiality as well. And then there are a number of the robotics companies that offer a robots as a service solution, which is more of I pay a monthly fee and I get this many robots for that monthly fee. So there's not a heavy capital lift there. But certainly there are, the ones that require capital. And in those cases, if that's a concern of the company, maybe the option is to look at a leasing type scenario with that company, because most of the robotics companies, again, have a partner that they will partner with in the financial space that will allow them to have a lease arrangement on their equipment. So a lot of different options there to get out of that, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million capital spend. From a Kenco perspective, so we obviously from just overall robotics, one of the biggest opportunities for robotics in the warehouse is just eliminating the travel time that a human being is sitting on a piece of equipment and going from point A to point B, or is walking from point A to point B. And if you're in a 1 million square foot facility, that can be a significant amount of time per day that is spent with them just moving product from point A to point B. And that's a human being at the current labor rates doing that job. And so if I can keep the human in the area that they're doing the either the put away or the pick or the inventory control, replenishment, whatever they're doing, if I can keep them in that space and the robot is doing the travel distance for me, whether that's moving pallets or it's cases or it's moving eaches to a pack out line, let the robot do that long distance travel, which takes away the wasted human hours that I don't need to spend. So that's the biggest opportunity for robotics inside of the four walls of a warehouse. And that's kind of how we started with them, and then kind of moved on to being able to do other capabilities with them. So we're now deploying our second auto store solution, which is a grid of bins that can be as high as your ceiling goes, pretty much. And the robots run around on top of the grid and pull the bins up and take them to a picking port for somebody to pick the product out of them. So think again about, instead of a person moving all over the warehouse, they're standing in one spot and the product keeps coming to them to be picked. So it's just how do you make those jobs that are in the warehouse more efficient by using robotics? And so those are our primary use cases is kind of, let's take the travel out of those processes, but also inventory management and how can you use robotics to capture the inventory within your facility without a person having to, again, walk every location and count. Are there ways that you can use robots to do that? So a lot of different use cases. We again, like we did with RPA, stepped into it with a very small use case inside of a facility, one area that we said we're going to outfit that with robots and look at what that does for us. And in that particular use case, we were able to improve our picking productivity by 400%. So that was a significant win for us. So that kind of led to the next iteration of what else can we do with these robots. So we continue to deploy. And I will tell you this too. I think this is one thing people kind of get in their head, that I need to pick a robotics company and this is my partner and this is who I'm going to stick with. That has not been our experience. So each of our customers, being in the third-party logistics space, tend to have a very different look and feel and profile within their warehouses. So we worked with a number of different robotics companies to deliver the right solution for the customer that they need in their particular warehouse. So
interesting. So you were talking about selection, and in my world, there's a lot around system selection and how we draft requirements. My guess is that robotics is going to be a new area. This is a new frontier for many, many folks. Now, we also talk about leading with the problem first. What problem are we trying to solve? Not, we want robots. It's rather, yes, what problem do we want robots to solve for us? So I imagine that we've identified our problem. We're going to market looking for solutions, but I would also imagine that we're going to encounter a number of different ways to solve that problem in the market. How do you suggest folks approach problem solving and system selection or vendor selection? To your point, it doesn't have to be just one, but rather, how do they even know which is the right version of a solution for the problem they've identified that can be solved through robotics?
That's a great question. So if you've never stepped into this space before, there's a couple things. So there are a number of really good system integrators out there that can help with this process. I won't name them because I'll forget somebody and somebody will be angry. But there are many of them that have different solutions that they can offer. They can help you do that analysis to determine what is the best robot for my particular process I'm trying to automate. But I would also say, a lot of times, what can make you most successful is your warehouse management vendor. They probably already have a number of what they'll call certified robotics platforms that they've already partnered with. And that might be your best path forward to say, does one of those certified vendors that my warehouse management system already talks to and works well with, would that work to solve my problem? Because you're not going to have as much trouble with, getting them integrated with your warehouse management system and onboarding them into your ecosystem of systems there. So those are two areas. But then, if you're looking out I don't know, if you Googled today, warehouse robots, how many hits you come up with? I imagine it's over 1 million. Really, this is where you start looking at the companies that are out there, the use cases and references that they've had, and just how far along are they? Because there's a lot of them that are, hey, we're brand new to the market. We're getting all this venture capital. We're excited. And a year from now, they won't be around. So you're going to look for longevity and application base and, just how many different use cases have they solved, so that when I come to them with my unique problem, they're going to be able to walk through it with me. So
I love that. I love that you're talking about leading with your WMS. So presuming that you're really satisfied with your WMS and that's a product you plan to stick with, where are they deploying the solution that you're looking for? I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. I would also wonder then, if your WMS doesn't have this capability, meaning it can't smoothly or seamlessly integrate with robotics or RPA, I would imagine that this is now an opportunity for us to take a long, hard look at, is this the right WMS for us? If I know that I want to go into more emerging technologies or adoptable technologies, innovative technologies within my warehouse, it may be time to look at my WMS first.
That's true. There are also, I will say, vendors that are, stepping in to bridge that gap where they provide a connection to your WMS, and then they can onboard whatever robotics platform that they've already connected with to their platform. And so, there's opportunities there for that solution to bridge the gap. But I would say, if your WMS is not modern enough to have some connectivity directly with automation, that might be an opportunity to rethink that strategy for the future.
So you mentioned, you've used a term in our discussions, interoperability, and the challenges of interoperability. Can you walk us through what that looks like, what that is, and how you solve the interoperability challenges?
Absolutely. So again, I mentioned in the 3PL space, we often have different solutions we're deploying for different customers. And so we have, WMSs that we support and we have certified, and that's what we use for certain customers. But there's also customers that have chosen to have their own solution that they want to use. And so if we're going to bring automation to the table, then we have to have the ability to connect to their system. We also need to have the ability to have maybe 3 or 4 different solutions in the warehouse for different areas, right? So maybe I need a robot that is moving pallets from one side of the building to another to, P&D stands. Or maybe I need a case picking robot that looks like something different and is from a different vendor. And maybe I have a piece of software that's optimizing my pick path, and that's a different piece of technology. And so all of these different pieces of technology have to come together in a way that optimizes the work on the floor with the people, because the humans are always going to be there doing their piece of the work. And so how do you connect all of these different pieces that I've talked about in a way that is seamless to that person that's trying to do the job on the floor, as well as ensures that those things work in their best fashion? Because every robot has what I'll call a sweet spot of things that they can do really well, and then there's probably things that they're not meant to do. And so we don't want the WMS to send an order to an each pick robot that is a pallet, right? So we have to make sure all those things talk together and the right information is being sent to the right tool at the right time, so that things flow seamlessly inside your warehouse. And so interoperability is all about how do those different pieces of technology talk to each other, work together in a timely fashion with the right data at the right scenario and the right tool. So that's really what interoperability is. And it can be very difficult if you have multiple pieces of technology trying to work through their piece of that entire value chain.
So I imagine that's one of the places where we see people, I don't want to say doing it wrong, but creating challenges for themselves. Where are you seeing issues arise, and how, or I don't want to say failed implementations, but where implementations don't go according to plan? What are you seeing? Where is that happening? What are the cautionary tales in your experience?
I think one of the biggest challenges, and it's so not sexy to talk about, but is get your data right on the back end before you start to put in automation, right? If your data is not accurate or your process is chaotic, when you introduce automation, whether that's digital or physical, all you're doing is automating a messed up process. And so it always starts with what is the process? What's the current state? What does it look like today? What are we trying to achieve? Right? And what is the data that's going to have to flow from my WMS to this piece of automation to allow it to do what it needs to do successfully? And then what needs to come back to my WMS? And is that data accurate? For instance, if you go to use an ASRS system like an auto store or something of that nature, if your master dimensional data, length, width, height, depth, weight, all those things is not accurate, so auto store bins have a limited size, and you'll be trying to put golf clubs in an auto store bin, which is not going to work, right? So that data has to be good on the front end. That process has to be well defined, and you need to understand how the process is going to change with the automation, because more often than not, it's going to fail because of the lack of change management with the people in the warehouse. How are the humans going to interact with this automation in a way that's going to deliver, um, a great experience for that worker? That's what you want at the end of the day. What's in it for them? And so if you go into this process without including the folks on the floor, without defining the process, how it works today and how it's going to work tomorrow, how the data is going to flow between them, and then you don't bring those folks along for the journey and help them understand how this is going to make their life better, help their job be easier, whatever the case is going to be, you're going to face an uphill battle a little bit. So I think change management is big, as well as the data side of it. Neither one of those are cool, shiny objects, right? But you said it a little bit in the beginning. We don't want to be out there with a cool, shiny object trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. We need to define the problem, and then we need to define how it's going to work in the future state process, and bring everybody along for the journey.
I love that you emphasize change management. That was my next question for you. We find that, and right now folks are adopting organizational change management in terms of large systems integrations, digital transformation efforts, and this is no different. Particularly, I think, in a place where folks are hesitant or feeling a bit of trepidation about robots. And what does it mean? We talked about it in the beginning. Are the robots coming to take my job? Is robotic automation going to automate me out of work? Well, I think that this is, of all the digital transformation that we talk about, one of those places where we absolutely must emphasize, to your point, bringing workers along, because this is people working alongside robots. Yeah. So folks need to understand that while, yes, this is going to change the nature of my work, it's not going to, I'm not completely replaced.
Yes.
And I think that this will look more different than a system change. This is changing the physical space. This is changing the physical movement of cargo throughout my warehouse. I think it's a more visual change as well for people. So I can see change management being even more imperative here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've found, and you'll see this with any robotics implementation, because of all the safety features built into today's robotics, which is necessary, they tend to move a little slower than a human. And so the humans sometimes have to wait for them to cross an aisle, or have to wait. And so, that slows me down. I'm being measured on my productivity. So now I'm frustrated about this robot, right? So what helps oftentimes is if we find a champion within the warehouse that everybody, you can tell who those people are, right? That everybody kind of looks to and respects and thinks well of. And if you can get that person on board with what you're doing with the robotics and how it's going to make their life better, let them be the cheerleader for you. Oftentimes, if you're standing up in front of the warehouse associates and explaining how great these robots are, they're shaking their head yes, and inside they're going, I'm not working with you on this, right? But get a champion that works with them every day that's going, guys, hey, did you know that this robot can do this, and it's going to take care of that for us? Remember that thing we were complaining about? This is really going to be a win for us. And so getting that person to kind of help with that is good. We've also done some things like running a naming contest so that the employees are naming the robots, and we implemented a couple of green, the color of the robots were green, and so there was two of them, and they ended up calling them Shrek and Fiona. So just fun things like that to get people into the process and on board, and then putting, if you can, some sort of program around how can we make the robots work better now that they're in and the process is flowing. How could they work better, or where could we optimize what they're doing? Are they causing you challenges? How do we fix that? So putting in a feedback loop where the employees on the floor feel like they have the ability to say, hey, this is not doing what you thought it was going to do. It's making my life more difficult. It's making things not so great for me. How can you help me? How can you help us help them? Right. So we want that opportunity to get them all involved, not just on the front end, this is where we're going, but on the back end, let them feel like they have input to how do we make it better, or how do we tweak it so that it's not, challenging you as much as it does, or something like that. So I'm a very people-oriented person. And so to me, the people on the floor are the most important assets we have in our business, and they are critical to our success. And so when I go in with an innovation and automation, I want to make sure that what I'm doing makes their lives better at the end of the day, not makes them more frustrated when they go home. So I want them in that process, defining to me what that looks like. So get them involved all along the journey. That's why I call it a journey, from the beginning of we've chosen this product all the way to we're continuing to work with it and make it better.
Excellent advice. I want to remind our viewers that we are able to view questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the comments. We actually have one that has come in, so I'm going to jump to this. There seems to be, it seems that defining the as is and the to be. Are there professional accreditations for RPA and a place to access consultants that can help vision the to be state for RPA?
That's a great question. I will say I don't know the answer to the accreditation. I haven't really looked into that. We chose to go with a specific RPA vendor that is high in the Gartner Magic Quadrant list, and they have a great consultancy inside the organization that helped us with kind of picking those initial use cases to show the quick wins and the success of the tool for our leadership team. And then as we go along, they're there for us to reach out to and say, okay, now we have this really complex thing that we're trying to do. Give us some recommendations on how to use the tool to do that. So I would say that most of the vendors that are well respected in this space are going to have that capability. But there are certainly consultancies that just help with, most of them tend to be around digital transformation. You'll find that they have a component of RPA consulting within their transformation consultancy. So but yes, there's plenty of help out there. And the accreditation question, now I'm intrigued. I'm going to go find out for myself. So thanks for asking that.
Thank you. So I want to talk about ROI and the kind of KPIs and measurements that you're seeing folks kind of set as the benchmark for a robotics or an RPA project. How are people identifying what their anticipated ROI is? How are they establishing a KPI and a benchmark? You talked about picking productivity was up by 400%. That's a fantastic kind of case study or success story. How do you generally see people measuring current benchmarks, expected return on investment, establishing new KPIs? What does that journey look like?
Well, I think the first thing is to ensure that you have a measurement system in place so you understand what your baseline is. And so that's the initial component. But I think most people tend to look to labor savings, whether that's savings in reduction, like I talked about, in temp labor, or maybe it's just reduction in this process that maybe, that gets shifted somewhere else. But I'm looking at this specific process and I'm going to reduce this many hours of manual labor by automating this process. So that's the big one. That's what everybody looks at. But I would say look at some of the softer things as well. A lot of times, your newer generation of workers, it is a recruitment factor to have them work in a facility that they get to work with robots or get to potentially learn how to help optimize the robots or be a leader in the robotic deployment. And so your turnover rate is something to look at. Perhaps your turnover rate and your engagement rates are going to change based on the fact that you've now brought in robotics. Training is another thing to look at. I know when we brought in robots, having somebody train on an RF unit on how to use the WMS system to do picking, and I have to press this function key, and then I have to go to this menu, and then I have to click that. And that training time was about 2 weeks to get somebody up to speed and really functional. And when we put the robots in, they have a screen that the employee can look at and interact with, and they can train in a matter of hours versus weeks. And so there's a cost to that, right? A significant cost. So that's one of the key KPIs to look at. Travel, I mentioned, is another one. How much travel am I reducing that the human has to do versus the robot's going to do? And then safety is another one to take a look at, because oftentimes, if the human is traveling less and the robot has all these safety features built in, I'm going to reduce my potential near misses and OSHA incidents and things like that by putting in an automation solution. So there's a lot of different things to think about that maybe people didn't include. Yes, labor savings is always one that people look at, but I think there's a lot of other opportunity there to look at different types of KPIs. And we always, particularly when we're doing a pilot, define 2 or 3 that we think are critical, and baseline those. We know what our baseline is, and then we say this is our target for the pilot, and we're tracking those on a weekly basis to ensure that we either hit them or this is not going to be a success, and we're not going to make those critical metrics. So
that's outstanding insight. So could you tell us what's the next exciting thing? What are you most excited about doing next, innovating through next, problem to solve next? What's on the horizon?
I think one of the big trends we're seeing in the industry, and you saw a good bit of it at Modex this year, is really camera vision usage in the warehouse. So I have probably 5 different startups that I'm working with in this kind of camera vision inside the 4 walls of the warehouse. One of them is intercepting your security camera feeds to determine if there are safety potential hazards and ways we need to coach our employees inside the 4 walls where they're using AI technology, applying it to what they're seeing, and coming back and saying, oh, there's a gentleman walking across your dock that didn't have a safety vest on. We need to have a conversation about that. Or somebody was on their forklift and using their cell phone. Anything that might be driving a potential safety hazard, and it's not meant to be a disciplinary tool, it's meant to be a coaching tool. So that's one use we've seen. There are tools that are capturing product as it comes in and goes out of the building to identify damage or maybe shortages or overages, things like that, that oftentimes our customers that are shipping to retail are getting chargebacks for. So we want to help them mitigate those challenges and those risks. And then just looking at packaging as people are packaging materials, making sure they got the right product in the box and that kind of thing. So just a huge amount of uptick in this computer vision area. And so we have a lot of different pilots we're working on right now around that camera vision enabling processes within the 4 walls of the warehouse. And as always, we have robotics products, projects going on too. I've got 2 major robotics implementations going on this year. So, we continue to work in the physical robotic space, and in our RPA side of things, we are currently now identifying things that can be replicated across multiple different types of warehouses and different customers that are just challenges that we see in every single warehouse out there. So how do we cookie cutter approach some of those RPAs to help our whole business, right? So those are the things that we're working on at the moment. So.
Fantastic. So what I've heard is data remains key. I think we hear a lot about, we talk a lot about, but we're validating further that we want to go into RPA. We want to keep innovating, getting our foundation really clean and well established with good processes, great data hygiene is definitely a first step. That there are incremental ways warehouses and distribution facilities can embark on an RPA journey, and that finding vendors that will allow them to do so at a pace that is comfortable from both an adoption and a capital investment rate is imperative. Establishing some baseline so that we can identify those KPIs for achieving the ROI that we're expecting out of our business case, also essential in this space.
Yes. The other thing I would say for people who are a little apprehensive about robotic process automation, RPA, we since the beginning, we have developed a network of what we call citizen developers. So we have engineers and maybe business systems analysts that can use the RPA tool that we selected and write their own RPA solutions. So it's not an IT function necessarily. So it's really easy to get pretty much anybody who's somewhat data savvy in your organization to use the tool and automate some of the more manual things that they're doing, which is just really a powerful thing as you look at, decentralizing that capability of automating your functions.
Fantastic. Kristi, this has been so eye-opening and informative for me. I'm sure the audience feels the same. Thank you so much for joining us on Logtech Live this week. It was fantastic to have you.
It was great to be here. Thanks for having me, Angela.
Excellent. So that is my time coming to an end. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't close out the Logtech live session with a dad joke of the week. So being that it is, we are all talking about an election year, where do penguins go to vote? The South Pole. Huge thanks to my guest this week, of course, Kristi Montgomery, the Journal of Commerce, and to Eric for having me on the show this week. Big shout out to the amazing team at Let's Talk Supply Chain. Eric will be back with you all soon, but for now, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the Blended Pledge, Kenco, Hartman Executive Advisors, and Inland 2024. Don't miss it. Links are all available in the chat. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Angela Czajkowski, and have a fantastic day.